Welcome to the garage. I'm Scott Lenahan.
I'm Joe Ubel.
Today's discussion is going to be around real estate commissions.
Yeah, this one would be interesting because I think it's kind of a lost understanding of how and what it implies in certain parts of our market.
Well, so the last topic was how to pick a real estate agent. I don't think people understand how we get paid.
Yeah, in that same aspect, I think some people are chosen based on commissions itself, or trying to figure out how they can minimize or maximize their commissions.
So there's going to be commissions might make its way into the conversation. I think it's important for people to understand when someone lists a house, there's a brokerage fee, a fee that's paid to the brokerage or the umbrella that the agent works under.
Correct.
It's from there that the agents earn a commission on that brokerage fee. So we're going to be talking, you might hear the phrase commission.
Yep.
But understand commission is based off of the brokerage fee.
Brokerage fee, yeah.
All right.
And then let's on that same side topic, may just a little bit explain. Okay, the listing side takes a commission in a normal transaction case. So if you see something listed on the MLS, which is attached to any type of website that MLS is attached to, takes a commission and then pays out part of that commission to the buyer side of the transaction.
Yeah.
To the agent involved.
Yes. So that's, I guess, what I was going to roll into next. Who pays the real estate? Who pays the brokerage fee? Who pays the commission? So to that end, when someone lists a property, it's at a certain fee. Depending on the level of service that they're looking for, it could be anything.
It can be anything. It's unnegotiable.
But in general, let's just use an example that the property gets listed at 6%.
Sure.
3.3% of that 6% is typically retained by the listing brokerage, and 2.7% is paid out to who the brokerage that brings in the buyer, whether it's Edina Realty, Coldwell Banker, whomever. Right? So from that 2.7% fee, the agent's going to earn a commission. Does the buyer, Joe, have any fee obligation to the selling, so the buyer side? Did they have any fee that they're responsible for hiring an agent?
On the buy side, they don't have any commission, but they have what's called a brokerage admin fee from what our perspective is. Now it depends on which brokerage you end up working with and what they do for you, which is a big part of a lot of it. But there is a small transaction fee that ends up being part of the transaction. But they don't pay commissions. Commissions come from the listing side.
Yeah, so that 2.7% fee is guaranteed by the listing brokerage to the buyer brokerage. So a buyer in general, for your representation or mine, is going to pay that broker admin fee, which I think now is at $575.
It is
$575. I always call it a glorified storage fee. That basically, in the event the brokerage gets audited, buyer gets audited, there needs to be a hard copy of the transaction held for 7 years.
correct.
So that's how I explain it. The fee does not go to you.
Nope.
Doesn't go to me either.
No.
So it goes to the brokerage, and the brokerage retains that fee for your service and my service.
Yep.
How are real estate commissions calculated?
Calculated in which way? Like, kind of way we talking?
Well, so that 2.7%.
Oh, so you're saying calculations based on sale price is usually what you're saying, right?
Yes.
All right. So your side is calculated on listing side sale price, buyer side sale price.
This is where agents are very good at math. They can calculate 2.7% of any sale price off the top of their head. It's always easier when it's 3%.
Yeah, that makes it more easier, right?
Yeah. So on a $200,000 sale, the brokerage, if I'm representing the buyer, is going to be paid $5,400, and then we earn a commission off of that.
Now let's go back here and understand here. The reason why we could have calculated that those numbers isn't because of
No, I'm good
commissions.
at math.
No. It's because we're talking about closing costs, and closing costs back in the time, it was 3%, 3%. So you could easily calculate a 3% closing cost percentage, be able to make that with numbers.
Sure. And it's not always based off of sale price. Sometimes a buyer may have closing costs calculated into the sale price, and it's not uncommon that the brokerage fee then is calculated off of the sale price minus the closing cost.
Yes and no. Most time it's not anymore, but that's definitely something that's negotiable.
Yeah, and I don't think a buyer's necessarily going to want to know this part, right?
No, it's a little complicated. in
But they
ways.
do need to understand that when they're hiring an agent, that it's not necessarily a financial obligation.
Correct, and I not in every case though. Let's not any property that's listed MLS in a certain way, that has listed through a brokerage and agents are invited in to bring buyers in. That in case would be paying the buyer's agent would be paid through that listing commission. Now, to muddy the waters at least a little bit, you have to consider there are for sale by owner options that are out there for sale by owner situations.
You're getting ahead.
I'm getting ahead.
Well, go ahead.
Can I at least jump on this one?
Yeah,
'Cause
go
I feel
ahead.
like this is the right place for this.
No, go ahead.
All right, I see how this goes.
I'll just be over here working.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
But there are situations where you'll run into a sale by owner or someone that's off market and the seller just wants to work with you as the buyer's agent, and maybe they don't want to negotiate. They want a sale price. It's X dollars, say $200,000, and you look towards your buyer and say, to put this transaction together, I need to be able to get some kind of compensation for this, and you look towards that to be able to make the transaction work, and it's something that's negotiable by any means, just trying to get the deal together.
Well, I mean, isn't that why someone would utilize the thought of selling for sale by owner? Is trying to avoid having to pay a brokerage fee, which is their right.
Absolutely, and that's a whole other conversation about
Yeah, it was further down the list, Joe.
Yeah, well. All right, then you want to take this conversation? Great.
No, go ahead. No, I get what you're saying. So, there are times you walk into a for sale by owner. There's not a brokerage fee that's been committed to somebody bringing in a buyer.
Right. So we have to.
So at that point, yeah, there has to be some compensation if you are going to represent them in that particular transaction. For me, it always, it's tough on those because the seller, the for sale by owner, yes, they have the right and the ability to sell the house on their own.
Yep.
But a lot of times they don't fully understand the process, or they do have a general understanding of the process, but there's a speed bump or some curveball that gets thrown into the transaction. And of course, you don't expect them to necessarily understand how to resolve it, but it does fall on you generally because you have some experience with whatever they're experiencing to try and resolve it. So you end up doing both sides of the transaction. So sometimes the for sale by owner, it's good for my client if I'm representing the buyer, but it's not always it sometimes facilitates more work for me.
Yeah, it definitely does, and
So that's where the compensation for sure, like you see those for sale by owners and you're like, shoot, I'm gonna end up on both sides. And your license is on a razor's edge because the seller's asking you questions.
Yeah.
And they're asking for advice. They're asking for certain things that you don't have an agency relationship with them. So a lot of times you're looking at them and you're saying, hey, you need some legal advice because I'm representing the buyer here.
This is another great reason why having an agent in your corner to have these honest, head-on conversations. That when you get a chance to then have this issue that pops up, which is almost every transaction, there's always some speed bump that goes into it, right? It isn't as simple as do the paperwork, do the loan paperwork, and get to closing done. If that was as easy as it goes, I think we'd have a job.
Well, and that's kind of that was further down the list here, what services do real estate agents provide for that brokerage fee and that commission? And, you know, I just off the top of my head just jotted down, you know, in the transaction, like you were alluding to, knowing what buttons to push and when to push them, right? Understanding from a seller perspective, market value, preparing the house for the market.
Preparing the house is a big one.
You know, and with that, like prioritizing what we're doing to get the house ready. You know, you get a seller that says they want to spend money on getting the house prepped, and all of a sudden they're talking about spending $2,000 for a garage door, and you're like, the garage door wasn't even in the top 10
Right.
on this list. So prioritizing what items we need to do to get the house ready, which ones you're getting more bang for your buck on, the process itself, whether it's going from listing to closing, just being able to navigate the transaction, interior consulting, staging, negotiating, the escrow, I left out marketing, I left out photography.
Yeah.
I mean, in that fee, you're expecting that person to basically grab the reins and give you direction from pre-list all the way through to close.
Well, wouldn't you also agree that in most cases, if you sit down with a seller, that you are probably not listening at that tomorrow, you have a plan. You have an organized plan that you're going to, you know, prep the house for whatever your plan is. You're going to get into a situation where you're going to, you know, have a game plan. You're going to fix this, you're going to clean this, you're going to organize this, you're going to move this stuff out, and then we're going to take pictures, and then we're going to do this. So it could be a week, it could be 2 months, it could be 6 months where you are taking time to prepare your house. And everyone works at a different pace. But as an agent, this is why you bring an agent in, so you have these honest conversations about your house, about what to do, what to expect.
What buttons to push and when.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because you've seen what buyers do, and you've seen what buttons they want to see.
Well, and I've also seen sellers waste time and energy doing stuff that they didn't need to do.
Right.
Or spending money on things that could have been better spent somewhere else.
Right. Like if I told you I had $5,000 to prepare a house, how would you spend it? And you know, a lot of times that is a conversation that's had. You know, what's going to give me the most value?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you know, so you're thinking about that for sale by owner scenario, they don't have that in their ear, so what they think is right might not be right. What picture's right, if for them, doesn't really picture very well.
Well, I think part of, I mean, let's face it, if I had someone to drive me across town, right? Maybe that's a bad analogy. We all know how to drive. But the point is, if you're for sale by owner, I mean, your main purpose for doing that would be to save that brokerage fee amount, right? So on a $300,000 property, let's say it was at 6%, that's $18,000. Now, that $18,000, I think it needs to be made clear, doesn't go to the agents.
Right.
The agents are making a portion of each side, buyer side, seller side of that transaction. As a listing agent, those fees that I talked about, whether it's interior consulting, photography, marketing, that generally falls on the agent. So out of their commission, that also comes off that amount. The cost of listing the property. I'm not saying sellers aren't going to see certain costs on getting the house ready.
Correct.
But it needs to be understood the general cost of marketing that home is going to fall on that listing agent. If they don't sell that house, they're out that money.
That's correct.
I think that's important for a seller to understand too.
Right.
You know, from the time you list a house to the time you potentially get it sold, that agent could have $1,000, $1,500, upwards number of dollars. I mean, that's just a general amount. It could be significantly more depending on what level of marketing they're doing for that home. If they don't sell it, they're out.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So
yeah, there's a lot on the hook there if you're not doing your job.
So what I started with, in general, I think of for sale by owners looking to save that brokerage fee.
Yep.
I don't know. Again, an argument could be made that they actually end up costing themselves a big chunk of what they're saving because maybe they aren't fully marketing the house to the entire marketplace. Because you have buyers out there that are working with agents. If it's not in the MLS, is it really getting full exposure?
Right.
So is that costing them potentially some value, especially in this market where there's not a ton of inventory out there, you know?
Right. So, and on that same spin side, so if you say you use some kind of platform of social media and you are, putting your house out there for sale, how many of everyone's seen it? It's only, a handful of people, chunks of people that are going to get some eyes on it. And that, it's word of mouth very quickly. I get that, but I think you're missing, a big chunk of the people that are going to show up. Now, I think what's actually is even scary about that, in my professional opinion, I think you would also agree with this, is when you have a house for sale and it's for sale, even if you say you use a version of the MLS and it's one of those, come and see my house for the owner, but the owner's handling it, kind of thing. Most times they haven't had the tools and the experience to understand that if you get 20 showings, that you're trying to compete with the other buyers that are calling in. So say if I'm the first person that walked in the door, I love the house, buyers want to buy it, maybe you can have a quick conversation with the seller and get a deal done before as many other agents jump in, right?
So taking an advantage of,
maybe not quite understanding how to navigate all these showings.
This is when we talk about liability. One of the things that I think is important is the Commerce Department. The state of Minnesota sees you and I as a shark.
Yep.
Right? We do this as a career,
yep,
for a living, and that for sale by owner they see as a guppy,
mm-hmm,
right? And that's not always true.
No.
You may have a for sale by owner that's a very good negotiator and marketer, maybe by their profession.
Their trade,
That's
yeah,
something that they do. But the state of Minnesota in general says, hey, listen, you take on some certain liability, Mr. Agent, when you begin conversations with this for sale by owner. A thing called agency, which I don't think we've talked about agency.
No, we should have that conversation, a different day.
Write that down as another topic.
Write that down.
Because we always struggle. But the state of Minnesota says, all right, it needs to be made very clear that you represent, in this particular case, the buyer. That seller may not have the negotiating skills,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a for sale by owner, if they don't, that's another opportunity for them to leave money on the table. A, the marketing of the home, and B, the negotiating of the home. Let's face it, I have 27 years of negotiating home sales. I can't expect that seller
to do it. Does one in their
well,
lifetime.
first of all, they may not know what's etiquette, what's not etiquette, right? I've had two recent examples where buyers went to go negotiate, and immediately in the discussions, I'm like, well, that's a really poor choice to approach this. Those weren't my exact words, but
something this isn't gonna work very well.
Yeah, let me help you help yourself.
Yep.
Right? Let's at least outline what a good negotiating strategy would be,
mm-hmm,
and then you can choose to work within that framework,
mm-hmm,
right? Now they may choose to step out of the framework, but at least I can look at them and go, well, this is why it didn't come together.
Well, you're not trying to say things that didn't come together in a certain way. They're not, but when in your experience, in your 27 years, you're trying to just give them the best tools in your toolbox,
Advantages.
to be able to get towards that property if they want that property.
Yeah, you have certain negotiating advantages and leverage that you can use. Use them.
Yep.
If you choose not to use them, that's your choice.
Yep.
But at least you understood what and why you would potentially use it. But for sale by owner is a lone wolf.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there, someone's coming in, do they understand which levers are leverage and which ones are not? And that's why the state of Minnesota looks very strongly at you and me and says, hey, you can't take advantage
Right.
of this seller. But at the same time, that seller has chosen to step into a marketplace to represent themselves and maybe doesn't know what is typical and atypical for single family home negotiations.
Or just an example is how to manage all the people that want to see their house.
That's a huge, that's all negotiating too. Like you said, first person comes in, starts to leverage them with, hey, my client has interest, here's the offer.
I'll
Listen to it now.
I'll give it to you for this and this and this and this, and it's like you're trying to stack on why you should accept their offer.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
take it off the market now.
Put a clock on it, a
Yep.
timer.
Yep.
You have 8 hours to respond to this. We need a response by 10.
And then as an agent, you might squash that deadline and say, we're not going to listen to your deadline. We're going to wait till all the
But
showings.
here's the other part. Maybe there's 10 showings set up on the next day, right? Well, yeah, to manage, do we let the other 10 people through, or is this an offer we can't refuse?
Mhm.
Well, if it's full price and you've been on the market one day, right?
Maybe
What's your risk?
Right.
Right? But that whole risk reward, being able to balance that. I've seen both buyers and sellers do certain things that you go, well, risk reward. I mean, you're
Yep.
taking a big risk for a little reward.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
So, I think for sale by owners, again, they have every right to do that, and I think if they have the skill set to navigate the marketing negotiations, or maybe they've got a real estate attorney background, something or a resource that they can lean on, I think that they'll be just fine. But if you don't have those skill sets, just understand you may be leaving money on the table, and you may be treading into an area that is over your head.
Right. I think from my perspective, from a sale by owner, it's the most overwhelming process. That you take out the emotions.
That's a big one.
Yeah, you're very emotional anyways, and then you put it in the business aspect of what,
Yeah.
of what we're trying to do, and they make decisions based on those. It's
Yeah.
just I feel like you're already gonna be shooting yourself in the foot.
This is the exclamation mark on this on this discussion right here. Is that over the course of my ownership, I've sold 4 homes.
Mm-hmm.
I've never represented myself in negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely
Because
right.
you bring up the big part, right?
Emotions.
Emotions.
Emotions factor into
Is my judgment
98%.
clouded?
Right.
Am I taking high risk for low reward? Just that perspective of someone that's detached. You represented me on the sale of my last home, the
Right.
negotiations of it anyhow.
Well, the question of is how my price look in today's market? Just that honest conversation. Everyone and their mom has a viewpoint of what their house is worth, right?
Yes.
And it's almost like you feel like your house is worth the X, but you need an honest side point of why it's worth XY, I should say.
Yeah.
And you're like, is it different? Maybe.
Yeah.
But what the whys? So if I came to you with here's an outside look of what I think you should do with your market on
Yeah.
your property, and
Yeah.
you would listen to my opinion because it's an outside opinion of the
Well, I
same
did
thing.
listen to your opinion.
Right.
I thought my house was worth less than what we marketed it for.
Right. So it's one of those situations you can't predict how it's
Well,
going
I'm
to
too close.
Right. So emotions
I'm
factor into
in my mind, I'm in perfect properties all the time. Right? My house was in Mendota Heights, great location, great neighborhood. But I look at it and I'm like, well, yeah, it's worth X, but I mean, I'd probably market it here. And you're like, no, you should market it here.
Yeah, this is where you're
In the value, the window value of here's the floor, here's the ceiling, I'm thinking more near the middle to the lower end, and you're like, no, you should push it here.
Yeah, because you can get it.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why you have someone to have.
But I'm too close, right?
That's why
I
you have someone to
know
say.
every little Piccadilly with that house that in my mind it could be better, right? And of course the market looks at it and goes, this is great.
That's the beauty of the market, and just all eyes on deck kind of mentality.
Yeah.
That it's honesty in one of the other directions, right?
Yeah.
You have brutally honest that it's an overpriced, or it's brutally honest it's underpriced, and you get the market to come to you in
Yeah.
one direction or other. And so you know.
So I have 2 more topics that
Yeah.
we can hit real quick. Are there alternative commission structures available? So with that, I mean, we started the conversation with the brokerage fees are negotiable,
Mhm.
right? And there's some minimum services out there
Yep.
that get for sale by owners into the MLS.
Yep.
They're usually guaranteeing a payout to whoever brings in the buyer.
Yep.
But there is zero representation in marketing from the company that gets you.
It depends on what again. There's levels of choices of agents, brokerages, and as you go up the ladder
Yes.
of what they're going to do for you.
Yep.
And as you farther you go down that ladder, you're going to get less discussion about what you're going to be able to do for them.
Yeah.
More of just I'm just going to put things on MLS on the internet, and
That's fair.
and even saying like I'm not going to do pictures or I'm not going to do any type of discussions for you. Call the seller.
In the internet world, we're not going to do pictures, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or the agent's going to take the pictures, or I took them with
Yep,
my phone.
With my phone. With my.
I mean, when you're going through properties, the pictures have become, our photographer has become a more valuable part of our team over the course of, I'd say, the last 8 to 10 years
Absolutely.
than ever.
Yeah, I think it's probably the number one thing that can make yourself stand out. If you don't have good pictures, you've already lost your buyer.
Well, because your goal is to get them in the front door.
Absolutely.
They aren't going to buy your house unless they walk through the front door.
And you are virtually looking through the house, through those pictures.
And there are some commission structures that go even higher with staging of the property.
Yep.
Where it's built into the brokerage fee versus just you paying a flat fee. And there's pluses and minuses to that, but
It depends on again how much hands on, hands off you want to take.
so I got one more here. Can consumers compare brokerage fees and services offered by different brokerages? How would you go about it?
There's no doubt you can compare. You can negotiate.
Yep.
You can compare. What Scott's going to do for you,
Yep.
and what Joe Blow's going to do for you.
Yep.
And you can explore what the next agent's going to do. You can interview 5 agents and discuss with both of them.
So my concern with someone comparing, and the reason I added this to the list is if someone's using brokerage fee as the sole comparison for choosing one agent over another agent, I would be very concerned. If an agent's not able to, if an agent's not able to convey to you their value, right, what they bring to the table, I just find it ironic that you would put them in charge of defending your value on your home. So I would make certain if I were sitting down with agents, I maybe wasn't using brokerage fee. I mean, obviously it should be in line, but if I wouldn't use brokerage fee as one of the main comparisons. So when I'm interviewing a seller, I mean, that's a question I'll ask. Between agent A and B, what are you looking for? What is going to be one of the deciding factors? Is it going to be results, or is it going to be just you looking at a bottom line? Because the bottom line is not guaranteed until you actually get a contract and you get to close.
And you can't guarantee until you sit closing your signed documents.
So I mean, you might get an agent that's willing to list your house at 1% lower on the brokerage fee, but their history shows that they're historically getting 2 to 3% less on average sale price versus another agent.
Yeah, so maybe.
So did you save yourself?
Yeah, that's the thing is 1% on a $200,000-$300,000 house. Is $3,000 or whatever it is.
Well, even on a $500,000 home, yeah, you on paper you save $5,000, but the performance history of this agent shows that it could cost you more than that. From the point of their ability to price your house right
Or
and help get you prepped.
Yep.
That may cost you 3-4%.
Right.
So I think focusing on the brokerage fee, while it's important for a lot of sellers, it shouldn't be your primary focus.
The primary focus should be how you navigate together with your agent, and to be able to have that honest discussion about what's going on in the market, what can I do to make myself stand out, and how can I price myself so it's the right price.
Yep.
It's the right situation for me.
I think this was a good discussion.
Yeah.
I hope it recorded well. So, this was information packed. I don't think there was a lot of waste in there. I don't think.
No, this is an honest discussion about how we see, aspects of the market and how we run into different discussions we have with buyers, sellers, seller owners, all those different aspects. We hear it, weekly, daily, about how this stuff works.
I think it's a general discussion that should get a listener to at least get a flavor for kind of some of the stuff that's there. But obviously, if you're looking to hire someone, it's something that you'll spend a little more time talking to. But this should at least give you a good starting spot.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
That way, your agent's prepared to have these discussions on what all these mean and what the differences are.
Yeah, and what basically catering to you. I mean, you're. I don't know. I don't want to get too far into it. So we're at about 30 minutes. You're good with it?
I'm good.
All right. Well, this was a good episode, Joe. Everyone, thanks for stopping by the garage. I'm Scott Lenihan.
And I'm Joe Ubel.
Are we supposed to say something about Tell me again.
Follow. We're really bad about this. All right. I mean, Scott is.
Yeah.
Go ahead and follow us on Instagram.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, follow us on iTunes and Apple Podcasts.
We're on iHeartRadio now too.
iHeartRadio too.
Yeah. Just so you know.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds
Good job.
good.